All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Break the Rules live stream. I am your host, Lev Polyakov, at LevPo on Twitter, and it is an absolute great pleasure to be here today for the gun control debate. We have Jack Cocchiarella, Styx Hexenhammer 666. Great to have Styx back with us here. And we're just going to get into it. But first, Jack, I would love to know more about you, the podcast that you do, the Zoomed In podcast, and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's great to be joining both of y'all. Really looking forward for a good debate about an important topic. So, a little background on myself. In the Zoomed In podcast that I do it with my friend Aaron Parnas. We try to elevate younger voices, bring on young people who are active in politics, leaders of movements or organizations that amplify and engage young people, or we talk to leaders in politics who are able to connect and uplift other young people to get them involved, because that's what we see as the most important thing our generation can be doing right now is breaking down the barriers to getting involved in politics and being able to join platforms like these to have discussions to show that this is kind of our time to start leading movements and getting ahead on issues.
Well, I definitely appreciate you being able to come in here. And it's a very rare thing to see for people who are of the opposing side to be able to come in and actually talk. And regardless of whatever the comments section has to say, that definitely earns my respect right there. So in the gun debate, I would love to once again start with yourself, Jack. What is your personal stance on what the gun policy should be? And also, what is your philosophical stance, for lack of a better word? Like, why is it that you believe what you believe about the gun issue as well? And then I would love to get a response from Styx, and then just have you guys get to it.
Yeah, so there's obviously going to be many layers to the conversation that we're about to have. So I'm going to try to keep my introduction as short as possible. My position on this issue, if we're talking about the philosophical element of it, is largely about the safety and common good of what's promised in the Second Amendment. So the limitations of what we've seen from the beginning of the Second Amendment and how far those carry and how far those translate now and how applicable that can be in terms of what regulations we can talk about if we're looking at gun reform. Now, if we're looking at the specifics of the bill that was proposed by this bipartisan group of 20 senators, I myself was happy that for the first time in 30 years we're seeing policy being proposed on gun reform. I was not necessarily thrilled with the legislation. It didn't do everything that I wanted it to. An age restriction on the purchase of assault weapons that would either be a minimum of 21 or 25 is something that I would have liked to see. But really, my position is that there is no reason why someone would need an assault weapon, that these weapons are far more dangerous, they are unnecessary, and it does not make sense to have militarized weapons available to 18-year-olds. So at the most basic, what I would have liked to see out of this bill is a minimum age requirement of 21 to purchase an assault weapon. Now, I do believe, although I am not a gun owner myself, but I do believe that the Second Amendment gives you the right to arm yourself, to protect yourself. Now, I also do understand that statistically, people who do have a gun in the home are more likely to be hurt or killed from gun violence. It's just statistically more probable. But I do understand everyone's right to protect and defend themselves. But in my opinion, there are limitations to that. And I think a 18-year-old being able to get a military-grade assault weapon should be one of those limitations. And we have seen limitations on what people are able to do or purchase or transfer in terms of those military-style weapons before. But in terms of what I thought of the bill, I was happy that a bill was put together. I'm happy that some senators actually had a discussion for the first time in forever But I still think there's more progress. I think it was an important first step, but there was more I would have liked to see out of it.
All right, well, before we go to 6, there's a weird sound. I think it's coming from you, Jack, in the background. I thought it was a yippy dog or something, or I don't know what's
that may be actually on my end. There is a bird out in the yard. It should go away. The cats are out there. They'll hopefully chase it away.
Okay, good. Good on those cats. Yeah, so Styx, wherever you want to take this, whichever issue, go for it.
Yes, I would say that all gun control is unconstitutional, for first and foremost. Secondly, it's not really pragmatic. If we look at the gun crime statistics over time, we'll see that it peaks actually in the 1990s and 2000s, partially under the assault weapons ban that has been proposed more recently. And actually, gun control in the United States is bigoted. That it is partially racist in origin. It originates with the Cruikshank decision in 1876, which was pioneered by the Ku Klux Klan, of all groups of people, among the Southern Democrats. And actually, I see a little bit of an overlap now with one of the arguments that's being made before the Supreme Court as we speak, which has to do with concealed carry, which is that New York and New Jersey that don't want to have to issue licenses for concealed carry to people. One of their justifications, this was actually made in oral arguments with regards to this case, was that people might shoot each other on the subway, et cetera, et cetera. The insinuation is that the brown people, the lower classes, are more violent, should not be armed, because if they do have a gun on them, that they will be more violent, they will kill each other. And I find it very, very strange, actually, that most of the proponents, it seems, at least in the craptivistic sense, of gun control, they ignore Cruikshank, which is the basis of the U.S. gun control, again, Ku Klux Klan sponsored in part. And they're making effectively the same arguments. They're making the same arguments today that they made in the 19th century. It is partially predicated on wanting the lower classes and or the brown people not to be armed because there is a paranoia among that class of people. The Brian Griffin sweater-wearing, NPR cup-holding liberals, number one, and the politicians, number two, who often have their own private militias, effectively, their own security guards, who are not subject to the same gun control. I would say the idea of banning what you would conceive of, Jack, as assault rifles is asinine, because they are not weapons of war. They're not military style in any way, shape, or form. In fact, it was funny. It was only a week ago. I can't remember exactly which Democratic House candidate made this point. He was talking about the AR-15 and hunting rifles, supposedly. And it's interesting because the Henry rifle that he held up as the standard of a hunting rifle that should be allowed to all the people is actually used by the U.S. military as recently as the war in Afghanistan. The AR-15 is not used by any standing army. It has become the boogeyman, ultimately, of the left wing with regards to guns. And other than hog hunting and a few other applications, is not actually a high-capacity, high-powered weapon at all. It's chambered in .556, which is an intermediate round. I find it also funny, Jack, you're a big fan of Joe Biden. I've been monitoring your Twitter for a few days here, and you seem
I appreciate that.
Yeah, you seem to support Joe Biden, generally speaking. We won't even talk about his approval polling. We'll push that to the side right now.
Oh,
it's very interesting. Well, it's interesting because it wasn't that long ago that he also, and I don't know whether this was dementia or whether he meant to do this, was opining on 9mm rounds as well. And in combination with his shtick with regards to so-called high-capacity magazines, which do not exist. Anything under 15 rounds is rather a low-capacity magazine. It's pre-modern, effectively. Would effectively outlaw a bunch of guns that have nothing to do with the AR-15. They're not even rifles. They have nothing to do with military. They have nothing to do with militarization. They're not even tactical. You look at some of the tactical pistols, at least they look cool. They may not function any better than a standard sidearm, a standard handgun, but at the very least, they look the part. We're talking about old-style handguns, sometimes almost 100 years old, and even those under such proposals would be banned. And I can get into some quotes. I've got a few listed here. I don't really use debate notes, but I do have a few quotes here that will, I think, undercut a few of the arguments of the anti-gunners as well. I'll get into those later.
So, Jack, go for it.
So So I don't know if it was going to swing back to me or we're going to have some more questions. There was a lot to unpack there. It's quite the monologue. I'd first say that in terms of some of the points and arguments that you were making about certain parts of these gun reform arguments being racist, I'd also point out that the NRA was founded in 1871, largely because, former slave owners, these plantation owners, they were terrified. And so, now they needed to, for some reason, they believed they needed to arm themselves. That was their perspective, and the NRA was being formed. This debate around guns and our rights to them and how many you could carry and an organization around owning them, that was not in the way that we see it today until 1871 was when that organization was founded.
Well, Cruikshank is 1876. I would say that I consider the NRA to be cucks. They are like typical neoconservatives. They don't want to
also
actually.
A failure of an organization.
I would agree with that.
This has nothing to do with the conversation that we're having right now. But I just think it's kind of interesting to see the NRA still being used as something that we point to largely when the organization is kind of out of money. I've seen a lot of people talking about the influence of the NRA, and it was prominent up to 2018, 2019, and a little bit 2020. But I think, if we're going to be messaging, and I say Democrats, I know that's obviously not yourself. I think, moving away from talking about the NRA should be important because it's just an organization without any real authority right now.
You're preaching to the choir on the NRA. They're a bunch of cucks. Gun owners of America are much better. The NRA absolutely.
Well, I'm glad we can agree on the NRA being terrible.
Yes. The NRA wants to disarm certain groups of people for various reasons. And like most conservative groups, they don't actually want to promote gun rights as per the Second Amendment. They want to stymie any further abuse of the Second Amendment by individuals that hate it even more than the last generation of anti-gunners and just freeze gun control. So there will come a time, if we were to go by their metric, there would be a time 50 years from now when the head of the NRA, which would be Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez by that point, would hold up a BB gun and say, from my cold dead hands, you're not going to take the 20-shot capacity away from my pellet rifle. Yes, of course, I oppose them as cucks. Again, though, I must point out, the history of gun control in the United States begins in the 1870s, as you correctly and succinctly point out, and it was racist. It was explicitly to disarm former slaves. That has been the case up until even now. When we look at the arguments made by the states of New York and New Jersey with regards to concealed carry, which may be decided literally tomorrow, and I can't wait to live stream on that. It's going to be orgasmic. Some of their arguments boil down to the rabble of poor people, the rabble of brown people in general in these urban areas will get guns and they will be violent with them if we don't restrict concealed carry. And that's just one tip of the iceberg argument that we really have on this subject. The classification of what you would conceive of as assault weapons further is very disturbing because you do not seem to understand what assault weapons actually are. The AR-15 is not an assault weapon. It does not possess select fire capabilities, and that term dates back to the 1940s. When we're talking about an AR-15, we're talking about an intermediate caliber serviceable rifle, which is good for medium game. Yes, you can use it for home defense. You can use it for self-defense. You can use it for plinking. It's wonderful. I've considered buying one myself mainly because it pisses many people off simply because it's the AR-15. There are so many rifles out there, many of which folks like yourself don't want to restrict at all, that are much higher caliber, that are much more deadly, that'll crack apart rifle armor. The AR-15 will require 5 or 6 shots to do that. Try using a 308 or a 50 cal.
And again, here's the thing about the AR-15. We've seen AR-15 sales in the past, month or since the tragic shooting in Uvalde gone up, 300%? This is a firearm. This is the firearm that people want to purchase, right? So you're talking about other rifles that aren't being restricted, but this is a firearm that people are aware of. This is a firearm that people want, and this is a firearm that people continue to purchase. Now, here's my issue with the firearm. In the same way that you weren't able to obtain a cannon at the founding of our country.
Yes, you were.
I don't think any person needs a weapon that can tear through and destroy flesh so quickly that it leaves bodies unidentifiable.
Dude,
That
people
seems
could
like something that
obtain
someone
a
does
cannon.
not need.
People could obtain a cannon in our founding. In fact, they made their own cannons. They also made swivel guns. They had their own warships. This is objective. There is no debate to be had about this. People often own their own cannons. Well into the 19th century, in fact, it wasn't relatively uncommon. The AR-15 round, you do realize the 5.56 round fired from an AR-15 is not actually designed to do massive damage. It's designed to wound. This was actually something I remember when they replaced the older 45 cal weapons, generally speaking, in the U.S. military, at least in part, with the 5.56. One of the prominent arguments against doing so was that the 5.56 tended not to kill people unless you hit a vital organ or the brain or something like that. You hit them in the throat, you hit them in the jugular. The reasoning behind it, and it is kind of gruesome, I would admit that generally, certainly, is that if you wound a person on the battlefield, then the medic has to carry them away. Their friends have to carry them away. Instead of killing one person and their dead body just sits there rotting and going through rigor mortis, you've injured the person and taken several people temporarily off the battlefield because they have to remove the body. That's the whole purpose behind switching to the 5.56, but the AR-15 that is available to civilians is not select fire.
It destroys multiple square inches of flesh and can rip apart organs. And
wait till you see what a 45 can do. So in other words, you want to get rid of all high caliber weapons. So it doesn't matter if it's bolt action, like most sniper rifles, by the way. Those you don't care about. Those will blow a person's head off. It will literally eviscerate the head. Their brain will be everywhere. The AR-15 will not do that. Have you actually looked? Please look up footage of the firing of these weapons. You go to Demolition Ranch.
The weapon of choice. And so if we are looking towards prevention of these senseless and preventable shootings, then it makes sense that the first weapon that you would go to ban or restrict or to put further background checks on or raise a minimum age limit for would be that weapon that is most popular, that has been most used in these mass shootings. That would be the first weapon.
But the problem is that then you ban that particular weapon, and then the next one comes up. Next, it's the AK-47, I suppose. The AK-47
if they continue to be used in these mass shootings. If you ban the AR-15, or if you ban assault weapons, and then you see a pivot to other weapons of war being used to mass slaughter
weapons of war
individuals in this country, then yes, I think it is reasonable that we take action towards solving that problem.
Well, then, pretty soon you're just going to have people doing Timmy McVeigh and loading up trucks with fertilizer.
So I watched.
The problem is you'd have to ban all weapons.
I watched your video, some of it in response to. I think you had posted it. You post quite often, which I commend, because it's difficult to put together videos and put together the thoughtful commentary. So I had to kind of scroll through. It's easy for you.
Yes.
It gets a little tiring. You gotta do stuff every day. Some of us are busy.
Hell, I've got a newborn child. I still make 3 videos every day.
Yeah, I try to tweet as much as I can. I got some assignments to finish up. I just finished up the freshman year of college, so now I have a little bit more time. But now I don't even remember what we were talking about. So
I want to make sure, by the way,
slope of banning more and more guns.
Yeah, so you say it's a slippery slope. I think the difference is Americans agree, and even I think liberals largely agree that people should be able to defend themselves. People should be able to own, a gun.
AOC might disagree, but in general, yeah.
In general, we're talking about the large majorities of Americans here. Those people, this group, this at least 50 and up % of us say yes, you should be able to arm yourself. Absolutely, totally fine. A lot of Democrats in Congress, I'm sure, that own guns, right? A lot of people who vote for Democrats who own guns.
I think most of the Dems in Congress, they don't own guns. They have people who own guns defending them because they're rich bitches.
Well, like I said, if you have a gun in your household, it's more likely to You're more likely to be, a victim of
Not my
gun
guns.
violence in some form.
I've got 4 of them.
I'm hoping you keep them safe. But
You see, the thing is, this is actually a weapon of war. This is a cavalry saber. This is a weapon of war. The AR-15's never been used by a standing army in the history of the world. So you should qualify that.
Are you pretty good with that? With your with the sword?
Yes.
Well, wait, I want to make sure, Jack. Do you agree with what Styx said that the AR-15 is not a weapon of war, as a weapon of war is defined?
Name a military that uses it.
I disagree. I do. So the terms that you want to use for describing it, if you want me to find a different way to label the weapon itself.
Has the weapon ever been used in war by a standing military? Yes or no?
So again, what I'm talking about is a weapon that's able to tear apart flesh in a military style manner. And
no, it's not. I wish it were. I'd get several of them.
Any regular person to need to own.
So in other words, well, if the AR-15 is a flesh-tearing, baby-killing, horrendous, object of war,
which
you would have to effectively
historically it is. You say this like we're talking about it in the abstract of what it can.
You're using emotional language. It tears kids apart.
We've seen what it has done, and that's the difference. Is that we've seen what it has done, and we've seen that this is the weapon of choice for those who wish to commit mass murders. This is their weapon of choice.
No, you're thinking of the AK-47.
Why is this so?
Why you're thinking of the AK-47 actually used by communist regimes to execute 100 million people after disarming them.
But why is it that the AR-15? Why is it these weapons are what are used in school shootings?
Because they are highly modular and they are highly available. For no other reason. If these people knew anything about guns, they wouldn't be using something chambered 5.56. They'd be using a 308 or some shit like that, or a Czech Scorpion.
Why is it so highly available? Why does it need to be so highly available? That's my question.
Why does any weapon need to be highly available?
My question is, why do you think 18-year-olds should just be able to go out and purchase this weapon?
Because they're members of the militia.
What militia?
The militia is comprised of all able-bodied citizens of the age of majority, aka able to vote. Would you like me to get into some quotes, by the way? We can define the militia right now.
Again, I don't really think conservatives.
I'm not a conservative.
When they say, or those who talk about their militias really mean it when they say that they would, stand up against a tyrannical government.
It doesn't matter.
I totally understand the argument for doing so, but I think when you saw
right now the government's more inept than tyrannical. Joe Biden is completely out
sort of police-like state in 2020, and I didn't really see a lot of conservatives being too upset with what was happening.
So in other words, people are patient. So in other words, people are patient and generally peace-loving and reluctant to go and shoot people. Well, then we've come to the crux of the problem. You think that the average gun owner, the tens of millions of people who do have those sporting rifles are a big problem, as opposed to just saying some psychopaths shot up schools. And by the way, most of the mass shootings in the U.S. are gang-related. It's a gang member taking their Glock or their SIG and gunning down some Crips. I don't even see the problem, by the way.
In the U.S. What are those related to?
Excuse me?
You bring up these, and so I know that eventually we're going to get to the argument of, well, look at Chicago. Well, do you know what Chicago is right next to? Indiana, which has some of the loosest gun regulation in the United States.
Then why doesn't Indiana have the same problem Chicago has? So if it's all about the guns and the lax gun laws, why is Indiana relatively safe compared to Chicago?
Well, you did bring up the issue of gang violence, but if you're talking about why are these guns so attainable, but that's what I'm just saying, something able to flourish because of the attainability of these weapons. And that's what I'm talking about is the issue here.
Okay,
banning
then
weapons at large is not the conversation that we're having.
All right, then let's say that we ban the
attainability that has allowed this epidemic to flourish.
Well, it's not an epidemic because it's not infectious, but it's not an epidemic because it's not infectious.
Well,
let's say that we ban.
You saw a shooter in Buffalo with their, manifesto, and then the shooter in Uvalde who pretty much copied it word for word to go on.
That's the power of the legacy media, baby. They encourage violence because it's good clickbait, including your friends at Midas Touch and the Lincoln Project. Anyway, let's say that we ban. Let's say that we ban the AR-15.
Doing that. I think Midas Touch is producing videos with, Jason Alexander encouraging people to watch the January 6th hearing. I don't think George Costanza's really encouraging that much violence.
Let's say that we ban.
Felt,
all right, if I may, let's say that we ban.
Wait. Okay, one at a time. Styx and then Jack.
If I may, let's say that we ban the AR-15, AK-47, the sporting rifle class. They're not weapons of war, but we've gotten rid of the semi-auto rifles. How is that actually going to stop anyone from shooting up a school? In some of these states, we already have mag restrictions, etc. How is a tactical pistol or even a pair of revolvers, etc., any fundamentally different? Because some of those rounds are way bigger than a 5.56. You get a couple 45s on your hip or something, you're going to do way more damage at close range.
I don't think that that's true.
If you think the 5.56 will do more damage than a 45 or a 50 cal or something like that, then it just shows ignorance.
I think these high-capacity magazines that are being able to be used with these specific weapons are dangerous and that they're unnecessary.
What about the caliber?
The point that I continue to return to is that defending yourself does not require an assault weapon. It doesn't.
The AR-15 is not an assault weapon. It's not an assault weapon.
It does not require these types of weapons. Your
boy Joe Biden said that if someone tries to break down your door, you should just open fire through the door with a shotgun. Now this shows.
When's that Joe Biden quote from? Was that like
Joe
yesterday?
Biden, I believe it was from 2018, if I remember correctly.
It was from 2018.
I believe so.
Well,
somebody fact check.
Joe Biden has progressed a lot since then. So.
Yeah, he's progressed in his dementia. That's for sure. Can I unleash a few quotes here to?
I appreciate that. I said I think he's progressed on the positions he takes on issues.
Oh yeah, so Washington Examiner, real quick, WashingtonExaminer.com. More advice from Joe Biden: just fire the shotgun through the door. This is February 27, 2013.
Oh, it's 2013.
2013.
And this
I don't think that's reputable. Well, because
that's a quote.
Yeah, but Joe Biden also said, I think marriage is between a man and a woman more recently from 2013 than 2013 is to 2022. And we have very quickly changed our position on that issue.
Yeah, he changed his position because he realized more than 51% of the population wanted gay marriage, of course. Obama and
Joe
Hillary
Biden
did that too.
Changed his position, and we thus saw change on this issue because more than 51% of the population believed that it was better if we had these rights. So what you're saying is Joe Biden changed his mind because it was politically popular.
Yes.
And then something happened because it was politically popular. So why shouldn't the same happen on this issue of gun reform? Why shouldn't these policies
instead of shooting through your front door with a shotgun,
more so over time
So instead of using a shotgun to blast your front door in half, what has Joe Biden's recent response on this been? What does he now recommend?
Oh, well, Joe Biden has plenty of his friends in the Senate, which I think he wants to encourage to participate on this bill. I know you weren't very upset with, I know you were pretty upset with Senator Cornyn for being a part of this bill. But Senator Graham as well. I think
they're all a bunch of neocons to me. Yeah.
What I think Joe Biden wants, I think we can both agree that Lindsey Graham is terrible. I think what Joe Biden wants is a bipartisan bill. That's what he's always wanted, pretty much on every occasion. So I think he wants a bipartisan bill. But what I think Joe Biden would like to see is a ban on assault weapons, or at least raising the minimum age to 21.
I think
there is good luck. I think once a bill with some basic parameters around it, and then I'd like to talk about the bill because I watched and listened to one of your videos in which you were talking about how you kind of like some of the school security. I hate any extra policing in schools just because it just increases the school to prison pipeline, and that's more detrimental than anything. But I want to talk about what you thought of the bill. Obviously, I'm expecting that you'll say you don't want anything in the bill. But I'd love to talk about that.
Well, if you watch my video, you'd know that's false.
Again, I do agree with
increasing
funding and the mental health funding as well.
Yes.
So,
I don't believe in lowering.
Are you
I don't
of the
believe
Ted Cruz position that this is an issue of doors, Do you think more mental health funding needs to be afforded to not only schools,
I think
but
a
people
large,
in this
I think
country
that
at
a
large?
large proportion of all of the mass shootings in the United States are gang related, and we should close the border and actually go after the criminal street gangs to stop those. And I think that a large plurality of the rest, there's a mental health issue at play. Sometimes people are on antidepressants, antipsychotics, and we should probably bring back asylums. My big problem with doing that,
So when
though,
it's white people,
let me
it's not an issue.
let me
Of,
finish.
that
No, let me.
fixing
You got to
it
let
would
me
be
finish my thoughts.
different. It'd
You
be
got
a
to let
different
me.
solution.
You got to let me finish my thoughts. I'm going to continue. I'm going to ignore you.
Thanks.
I agree with that premise. The problem is that the government will probably just use that to justify more red flag application for people who have topical mental illnesses. So the person with ADHD, well, they're not allowed to have a gun. They might be violent. A person with schizophrenia who takes their medication, they're effectively in quasi-remission. They can't have a gun. Depressed person, oh my God, they might shoot themselves. Quick, we got to take their guns away from them. Red flag laws are a cancer.
Wait, let's finish and then go ahead.
Oh no, I'm
okay. Go for it.
Yes, I thought you were I'm sorry. So here's what I'll say about this. Okay. You're saying that if this law that is being scrapped together, barely able to happen, just like holding apart, just being barely held apart on either end, right? I am shocked that we are able to get 10 Democrats and 10 Republicans in the Senate together in the same room to talk about any issue. You think this group of people is going to be able to take your guns away next year? You think the current construction of the Senate that we have right now, that couldn't pass a $15 minimum wage, that couldn't pass voting rights,
Good.
do you think they are going to turn around and just say, oh, yes, so we were barely able to do anything on this action. Our next step is take all guns away? Is that truly your worry? Do you think that they're that effective?
Begging the question fallacy aside,
body at this moment to go ahead and turn around and take your guns away, because it's not a body of the majority. I promise you that. Now, this issue has support from the majority, but how the Senate works is something has support from the majority, and it takes 25 years for it to get passed.
Jack, you've asked me a question. Now let me answer it. Yes, I think I will go by Cornine's own words when he said that the only reason that they didn't include an assault weapons ban, 21 plus to buy firearms, et cetera, mag restrictions, was not because he had a principled stance against them as unconstitutional. And this is posted publicly. Everyone go look at Cornine's Twitter page if you want to fucking believe me. It wasn't because these proposals were unconstitutional, and he's a senator from Texas in the GOP, so he's not exactly a left-winger. It was because by adding them to the bill wouldn't pass. So he's not principled. Neither is Romney, neither is Collins. Of course, these people would absolutely love to disarm people. They're not going to be able to, but yes, I believe that some of these individuals would like that. They live in gated communities and penthouses with private security. They are afraid of some random brown person on the subway airing them out. As many liberals are. They're racist. Cruikshank was bigoted. The arguments being made before SCOTUS with regards to concealed carry by the leftoid states that are fielding them, they're bigoted explicitly. I find it's very funny. Liberals will also say, well, once brown people start buying guns, then there will be action. That's funny because I seem to recall earlier this year there was a group of Black Panthers by the hundreds marching with their AR-15s, those uber scary military weapons, and nobody did jack shit about it. There were no shootings. There was no violence. They marched down the street. Who cares? I hope they buy more weapons.
Why? When did your fascination? I want to dive into this because I've never very much
trying to do psychology on me is a losing proposal.
I'm from the great state of Florida. I have lots of friends who are conservatives. I know that's not the title. How would you describe yourself? I don't want to give you a title that
I don't even know how to describe myself. I'm quasi-libertarian, I suppose.
You're just a guy with a great set of plants behind them. Again, I'll just say, just for my own, edification, I just moved to a friend's place in DC, so my background setup is not as beautiful as yours. Also, I thought that it would be a good idea. I don't usually wear glasses, as you can tell. I'm like legally blind, so they're a little thick. But I thought I would join the party with you two and pop on some glasses. I thought we could all wear them together.
Now you just need a gun in the background,
There's not. Your comment section, I think everyone didn't really love the glasses or appreciate them, but I was kind of trying to join the party. I would like to understand. So like I said, I'm from Florida. A lot of my friends, they didn't because, they were 15, 16, but, their parents owned weapons, or, they had property in which they would go out and shoot. And when we, because I always have been talking about politics, when we talk, similar to a debate like this, I think we're having a very, civil, and we're not really interrupting each other. I saw some comments. I'm looking at the comment section a little bit. I don't know what clank means, but I've seen some people say that this is still a decent debate. But when we've talked about these issues, when I talk about these issues with my friends, they were always very careful with, teaching people on their property how to shoot, very careful with talking about safety, understanding the damage that can be done from a firearm. And
Absolutely.
they cared about being responsible gun owners. So my question is, pardon?
Same with me. I'm not going to aim the gun at anything I'm not shooting at.
And so they also, because they were responsible gun owners, wanted more responsible gun owners. They wanted people who weren't just able to go and, with some cash, go to a market and just buy a gun. They wanted background checks. They wanted people to be trained on how to use this weapon, because when they brought people to their property, they didn't say, hey, take this thing, there's a target over there. It was a very long process of instructing, a very important process of realizing the weapon that you were holding. It wasn't just here's your weapon. And these are the same people who
people are
encourage others to
responsible.
get guns. So
People are responsible for learning how to train with their weapon. Absolutely. I would agree with you.
If you don't believe that there should be any restrictions on your ability to own firearms, do you see your ability to need to be trained like other responsible gun owners would want someone using their weapons for the first time to be? For the government requiring that, do you see that as a restriction or an infringement on your rights?
The government doesn't, it's a non-issue. The government doesn't need to require what's already being done anyway by at least rural and small town Americans. This is a problem for the inner cities, where somebody goes to the back seat of a car in an alleyway and buys their piece in order to kill a bunch of gang members or something like that. It's not an issue for rural America.
You keep bringing up gang violence and talking about,
because it's the main source of gun crime in the U.S. is gang violence.
So, but when I'm talking about these and again, we're talking about AR-15s that are being used.
No, we're talking about guns in general.
In school shootings.
So now you're pivoting.
The shooter. I'd let you finish some of your thoughts. I'd say
no,
some of them.
No, you had a 2-minute monologue.
Me some of the time. But again, I'm talking about AR-15s because you're saying why you don't think that they should be banned. But that's the weapon chosen by 18-year-olds who don't have any connection to the black market, who aren't able to, go on some dark web to find a gun or have some connection, because they're not criminal masterminds who are able to track down these weapons. Only by the fact that they are 18, and being 18 allows you to go and get these weapons, are they able to get them. So they are able to legally procure these weapons. They wait till they're 18. They're not committing these, and I'm not speaking for every instance. Again, I'm speaking for the vast majority of them. They wait until they are 18 years old. They purchase these firearms legally. They're doing it legally.
I have a quick question for Jack.
Was not 18 but 21, it would be a different story.
Yeah, then you have 21-year-olds using them to kill
I have a quick question.
I have a quick question
for Jack. I know you're focusing on the AR-15, but like Styx was talking about earlier, if let's say the AR-15s are banned, there would be other weaponry that would become the weaponry of choice, and this would go on and on and on until all the weaponry is banned, right? Like, why do you keep sticking to the AR-15 if later on they could just get a different weapon?
So I do think that those weapons should continue to be banned, as you've seen weapons like that, as you've seen in other countries that have had mass shootings and then realized we cannot live this way. Countries like Australia or other European nations where you see basically zero as their level of gun violence. I think you've seen, and I would love this to be looked up. I can try to do it myself very quickly, but I think compared to the mass shootings that we've had in the past 10 years, there's been, 6 overseas in Europe, or school shootings. There's been 6 overseas in Europe, and all, European nations as compared to
Most gun crime
what must
involves
be hundreds
handguns.
that we've had.
Well, that depends on how you define mass shooting. Under the old definition, half of these wouldn't be classified that way because it's just drive-bys and shit.
Oh, so it's okay if it's 3 people getting shot? That's fine.
I don't
That's
mind
not
if,
a mass
if
shooting.
gang members kill
You
each
don't like
other,
the
they're going to do
you
it
don't like
anyway.
the label of that?
Well, I mean, you've changed the methodology. That's why it looks like there are so many more of them. Is all I'm saying.
So whether it's
You've
fair
lowered
to
the
or
threshold
it's not
for-
fair to, we're having this conversation. This conversation around guns has been elevated because several mass shootings at schools, at grocery stores, at funerals. There was a mass shooting of someone who was being buried, who died of gun violence.
So they
at the hands
killed
of
the
the
dead
police,
body.
I'll say. No,
Did they shoot
there
the
was
dead body
4
too?
people shot. I don't understand why it's kind of a joke to you.
No, but when
Well,
you're
that's
talking,
the idea is funny.
But
when
that's
you're
the
talking
conversation
about
we're
when you're
having.
talking about
But I'm not-
AR-15s, though,
I don't want to have this conversation, and because there's, again, like I said at the beginning, there's a big scope of this issue. There's a lot to talk about. But what I'd like to talk about specifically is gun violence in communities, and more specifically at schools, where we see the weapon of choice being an AR-15.
But again, can we just drop? I want to make sure. Wait,
Doesn't matter.
Real quick, I want to make sure we can drop the AR-15.
It doesn't matter which weapon is chosen. If that were banned, they would move on to a different variety of weapon, an AK-47. Maybe you've banned all sporting rifles. Now they've got a 50 cal that can shoot one person in the neck, kill them, come out on the other side, blow the second person's head off, tiddlywink off their skull, and hit a third person in the shoulder and injure them. The AR-15 ain't doing that. You've made an unequivocal statement at the beginning of this debate that the AR-15 is effectively a flesh-tearing weapon of war, and that's simply not the case. It is not. Please look up. Please look up. Please. Will you let me have 10 seconds?
Okay. Yeah, one at a time. One at a time.
Styx and then Jack. Will you please give me 10 seconds here?
They were not.
Hold on. Let's Jack. Please let Styx go, and then you're gonna.
Look up Demolition Ranch or some other gun channel and then watch them fire at watermelons or pieces of steel or anything else with these weapons and see where the AR-15 stacks up to a 50 cal, to certain 45 cal weapons, to weapons chambered 308, 30-06, etc. There is no comparison. It is an intermediate caliber. It is effectively a 22 on steroids, made rifle ready. That's all it is. I love the fixation is completely ridiculous. If you were to ban that weapon, somebody would just get something a little bit more expensive, chambered in a much more deadly round, a little bit bigger, a 308. I would love to get a 308 semi-automatic. I think that it's a wonderful idea. Then if a bear comes lumbering out of the woods, something that people dwelling in penthouses don't have to deal with, Feinstein's not exactly afraid of coy dogs attacking her when she's walking in the woods, then I'll actually stand a chance with an AR-15. Well, maybe it'll scare it off with the noise. And that's basically the sum and substance of it. But we're not, I mean, that's one particular model, one extremely limited example among a much larger gun debate in which people like yourself are not simply saying, hey, we'll get rid of the AR-15. You're also talking about mag restrictions, which make no sense. In some cases, it would outlaw low caliber handguns that aren't even remotely military in nature, including 22 handguns. You're talking about raising the age to buy weapons, thus violating the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, because you would be preventing people in the militia between the ages of 18 and 20 or even 18 and 24 from even fully participating in the activities of the militia. It would also violate the 4th Amendment. Red flag laws violate the right to a speedy and fair trial. It's pre-crime. So there's this plethora of different things that we could talk about, and your only fixation, and I don't even understand it at this point, is with the AR-15.
Jack, you're muted. But just to be clear, Jack, before you speak, we just had a conversation a minute ago where you yourself said that once the AR-15 is banned, it's not really going to stop there. There's going to be other guns, whether it's the more powerful ones that Styx was talking about or other ones. There's still going to be other guns that would be available for people to use in these shootings. And you yourself confirmed that, which is why even talk about the AR-15 now? Let's just talk broadly about the weaponry here. And from what I understand, you would want every other weapon that would be available for these kids to be taken away. Is that correct? I just want to make sure that we're on the record here.
I'm not putting a blanket statement saying that every weapon, because I know that if I say every weapon that could be used to commit a mass murder, you'll turn around and say this little sword that I have could do it just the same if someone had 5 years of training, so on and such, which just isn't necessarily true when you compare the ability of these weapons to take lives quickly and efficiently, right? To just do it in a rapid order, which is what has been done, is to go into these schools and kill people as efficiently as possible, because that's what these weapons are designed to do. Now, why is it, and I have the other question that I wanted to bring up, why is it that there is a federal restriction until the age of 21 to purchase a handgun?
I do not believe that that is actually true.
Under federal law, the minimum age to buy a handgun from a licensed dealer is 21.
I think you may be looking at state laws, my dude. I know there are states that have that imposition.
I'm 21. Do we want to get a look up?
Yeah, let's.
Oh, okay. So ATF.
Live fast check.
All right, I'm looking at the ATF over
Law
here.
prohibits handgun
It says,
sales by licensed dealers to persons under 21.
which law is that? Because I'm looking at the ATF right now, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, and it says
18.
over here, an individual between 18 and 21 may acquire a handgun from an unlicensed individual who resides in the same state, provided the person acquiring the handgun is not otherwise prohibited from receiving or possessing firearms under federal law.
Yeah, you're talking. There are some states that have raised it, including my home state of Vermont. They've raised it to 21, and I think they wanted to do it for sporting rifles. I'm not 100% sure if that passed. But no, there is no such federal law. Even when we look at the federal law that you're looking at that's being proposed by, the cucks in the Senate right now, like the Cornines and the Romneys, did you actually check the ramifications of the red flagging system there? It's just a suggestion. It's to give states...
It's an incentive. It's a financial-based incentive.
An incentive. Hey, we'll pay you in order to violate the Constitution. It's not even a federal law.
Like I said, I don't think the bill is perfect. I don't. So
no, it shouldn't be passed at all.
Well, I think I'd like to see more. Who are the senators that you do enjoy their work? I'm guessing like what? Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz.
Fuck Ted Cruz. I like Rand Paul.
Oh, okay.
Well, let's get a little bit deeper. Let's get a little bit deeper into this.
I'm fine with fuck Ted Cruz. I'm perfectly on board.
We would agree on Ted Cruz. Yeah. We could have a Ted Cruz fuck party.
Yeah, I want to get before the fuck party. I want to get a little bit. I want to get a little bit deeper into the gun situation here. So, Jack, where would you personally then stop? I know you talked about the sword, but where would you personally have the cutoff at what guns are going to be allowed for 18-year-olds to have?
Well, I don't think 18-year-olds should be able to purchase any gun.
All right, so let's
deny the right of the militia because they're part of the militia.
I can't rent a car. I can't. At most hotels, you're not allowed to check in until you're 21. So
what does that have to do with the Constitution? The Constitution does not say the right to keep and bear hotel rooms shall not be infringed.
But Jack, can you steelman Styx's argument for if we imagine the worst case scenario of why a militia would be required here? Can you steelman Styx's argument as to why 18-year-olds should be able to have this kind of weaponry?
Why are you asking what this scenario would be?
Yes, the whole point, the whole reason as to why the 18-year-olds would be allowed or should be allowed to have this kind of weaponry.
So should the draft age be raised to 21?
Are you saying...
Should the age to vote be raised to 21?
No, because that's not a dangerous thing. Well, actually, you could say
voting's not dangerous.
I think you could say it's a potentially dangerous thing, depending on who you're voting for. If you're voting for Rand Paul, maybe so.
I can't vote for him, unfortunately. I'm not in Kentucky, so I have to vote for Bernie Sanders or whatever punching bag he runs against. It's very sad.
Do you vote for Bernie? Do you just kind of get in?
I'm not going to vote for Bernie Sanders. He's over the hill and crazy.
Okay.
He sold out and decided to buy a third home. But no, here's the thing. The militia is explicitly defined as people who are of voting age up, who are of able body, not currently incarcerated or criminal lunatics.
And well-regulated, I'd state as well.
Yes, regulated, well able to function. 1700s parlance, not the same as the current meaning.
and being regulated, right?
Well, let's
Yes,
get into
like
that
a
meaning of
well-regulated
regulated.
diet. I can
If we talk
regulate
about-
my diet. I don't need the government to do it for me.
Yeah.
Well, the
Regulated
government
means
does do it for you.
No, but just
No,
to
the
be clear,
government-
Jack,
the government
it's not...
is no government. Lev,
Yes,
government
go on.
regulation is regulation, but it is subject to the concept of regulation. That is, regulation is an overarching concept. Government regulation is one component of it. We know that the militia can involve soldiers because there were no soldiers in the United States when the Second Amendment was ratified. And we know that the militia encompasses the people at large because, of course, there is a literal reference to this from multiple founders. I've got quotes here if I need to use them. Well regulated in the 18th century had nothing to do with government regulation. It had to do with the regulation of mechanisms. So the militia as a body of people, a militia capable of mustering, the able-bodied people who owned their own weapons, self-evident within the Second Amendment, is regulated by themselves. They regulate themselves. It's just like a machine. To regulate it doesn't mean the government comes in and repairs the machine. The machine is well able to function. Huh?
What weapons were they owning?
Weapons of war, literal ones.
Yeah.
Did you know that Lexington and Concord, the spark that fired the Revolutionary War was because the British tried to confiscate the military armaments of people that didn't like them. Didn't have to do with
tea. Was it an AR-15 that they were taking away?
No, it was cannons and things of that nature. Cannons and explosives, things that will actually rip a person apart and make them unidentifiable. That
you can shoot in less than half a second. You can fire off. Historically, it's very easy to transport, move, and fire cannons rapidly. Just carry them around.
Okay,
right?
let me ask you this then.
Historically, it's a quick thing. You're just popping them out.
Why is it that for the first 100 years, then, if gun control was on the minds of the founders, why is it for the first 100 years of the United States prior to Crookshank, there was never any mutter of the need to legislate against weapons, even though during that time you went from flintlock muskets and very, very old style non-breech loader powder cannons to Gatling guns, lever actions, and revolvers. Those are all available long before Crookshank. It doesn't matter. We're talking about a constitutional argument, not a false pragmatic.
Well, how many school shootings were there?
Quite a few if you count Native Americans, actually. And I bet they wish they had had more guns.
There were also anarchist bombings going on.
Yeah, they were brown people, so they don't count, right?
But also, Jack, I want to make sure we agree on the definition
I'm unsure of the point that you're trying to make with that.
I'm saying that weapons evolved well beyond the old flintlock muskets that were already much more advanced than they had.
Sure, and the way that we view weapons should evolve as well.
But it didn't. For the first 100 years, including the whole period that the founders were alive, not one person uttered a word in the necessity of regulating weapons. Now, why is it that supposedly uncouth, illiterate people living in the hinterlands back then can be trusted with multi-shot weapons and cannons and all these things and didn't have a problem, but all of a sudden now it's a big problem? Have we devolved in some case? Have we become less intellectual, less well-learned, less well-responsible, less well-regulated of ourselves? Have we become more irresponsible now than people living out in the mountains, chewing on, literally putting gunpowder on their food as seasoning? Are we less developed than them? I would like to think not. I mean, I suppose in the inner city that might be a problem, but not where I come from.
Come on now. You seem pretty organized and got it together. I'm going to keep complimenting.
I'm very well regulated. Yes.
If we're going to have some middle ground, which I'd like to have, I gotta just continue to compliment the background because it looks great. You do a great job.
Wait, before the
compliment, one hell of a pivot. I just wish I had a gun back there, but I'm in the Netherlands at the moment.
Wait, Jack, I want to make sure that you agree on Styx's.
Back there?
Well, you have to file to get a gun in the Netherlands. I've considered it, but I'm not a full-on citizen, so
I thought you said you lived in Vermont.
Huh?
Did you say wait, you said you lived in
Vermont? I married a Dutch woman. I'm on 2 continents. Right now I happen to be in the Netherlands,
Oh, so that why I had to wake up early and you just were kind of kicking it? Is there a time difference here?
If I was in the United States, we have a better time, It is a problem with scheduling,
Wait, I want to make sure, Jack, do you agree with Styx's definition of well-regulated? Because from what I understand, you were talking about regulated meaning some entity like a state regulates it, and Styx had a different definition. Do you agree with Styx's definition of well-regulated?
No, we disagree on that position.
Okay, why?
Well, I think when we're talking about regulation, I think we're talking about government regulation of the firearms themselves. I think that maybe this is a view of the Constitution that we have that's separate, it's different here. But I think the evolution of how that we should view the Second Amendment should be regulation of weapons as they become more advanced, as they become more destructive, and they
but they
less
are
of a need for.
But the thing is, if you look at the Second Amendment, the militia is subjugate to the people at large in the second sentence. The regulation cannot come from a government. It's explicitly impossible. Let me read off a couple. If you'll let me, if I may.
Okay, yeah. Let's
if I may, I've got a couple of quotes here. I ask, who are the militia? They consist now of the whole people except a few public officers. This was George Mason in the Annals of Congress, late 1700s, one of the founders. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. A well-regulated militia composed of the body of the people trained to arms is the best and most natural defense of a free country. James Madison. Guard with jealous attention the public liberty. Suspect everyone who approaches that jewel. Unfortunately, nothing will preserve it but downright force. Whenever you give up that force, you are ruined. The great object is that every man be armed. Everyone who is able might have a gun. That's Patrick Henry. And finally, the Constitution shall never be construed to prevent the people of the United States, who are peaceable citizens, from keeping their own arms. Samuel Adams. So if the founders believe that it's the people that keep and bear arms, including military weapons, which they explicitly had at the time, and if these founders never uttered a word in problematic nature, over the subsequent 50, 60 years, some of them were still alive, despite the development of much newer weapons, which were much more adept than the ones they had at the time. Why should we take seriously the concept now that we need to revise this, say the militias, the military, the people shouldn't keep and bear arms, regulation comes from the government that barely existed at the time that it was ratified, and that people should give up military-style weapons that aren't even used by a military like the AR-15. No military uses them. They're not select fire. It's not an assault weapon. And who cares if it's a military weapon? Dude, you can go out and buy a machine gun with a tax stamp. You just have to find someone willing to sell it to you. You can buy a grenade launcher. Old 86 ban assault weapons. You can buy them too. It's too bad there are only a handful of them there and they'd cost about 20 grand. Basically, it's just to keep poor people disarmed, poor and brown people. It's the same fucking shit as Crookshank.
And that's your position.
Well, it's the position of the founders too. So yeah, I mean, good company.
Who I don't think had, much knowledge on the current state of what our firearms would look like.
They also didn't understand the internet would exist, but the First Amendment covers the modern printing press. They didn't understand there'd be email, but the Fourth Amendment covers that. They didn't understand there'd be more than 13 states, but the 10th Amendment covers them. They didn't believe in suffrage for women. They agreed with slavery.
And so they regulated the firearms as they were at that time.
But they didn't regulate them. There's 100 years of no regulation.
They didn't regulate them as they were at that time. Different firearms entirely.
The flintlock musket was completely obsolete by the middle of the 19th century.
I want to go back to a central point. I want to go back to a central point earlier that you dismissed, and you said, I don't think that's true, when it entirely is.
What's true?
The students' bodies at the Uvalde shooting were unidentifiable in such a way that parents had to swab their mouths and take DNA tests so they could figure out which children theirs. A young girl who wore green Converse was only able to be identified because of those shoes, because her body, and I'm sorry for those people who are going to be disturbed by this because it's disturbing on the live, was so torn apart by this weapon that it was unable to be identified.
Why do you keep pivoting? What does that have to do with the Second Amendment?
Someone needs a weapon that is its purpose. I don't think someone needs a weapon that is its purpose.
Then you believe in banning all firearms, because the purpose of all firearms is to stop an attacker and to use
how many firearms could do that to 21 people in an instant?
Most of them. I hate to tell you this, but again, the AR-15 is not the ripper-aparter. If we're actually going to take that tale seriously, and I don't, by the way, I think that's horseshit, that dude had to have pumped each body with 10, 20 rounds in order to do that kind of damage.
Which completely obliterating them. Which he had available to him.
He could have used any other sporting rifle. He could have used revolvers. Dude, I have speed loaders. Dude, you can get a speed loader for a revolver.
As an AR-15?
Yes, absolutely. I've got a revolver at home. It's a 9-shot top break HR Sportsman. It's only in 22, but I've got speed loaders for it. I guarantee you that I can put as many bullets in a person as if I was using an AR-15 with 10-round magazines. It's not that difficult. It's called training. I can pop off many, many dozens of rounds a minute with that.
But again, you're saying it's called training, right? These are 18-year-olds without training who are buying a weapon that they can buy in one day and then go out and do the same amount of damage as someone, I'm sure, like yourself.
Yeah, so he dropped a bunch of people and then he mutilated
lots of training. Yeah. So it would take
you want to know what the real you want to know what the real problem is here?
Let me finish my thought. Let me finish my thought.
Go ahead.
It would take a person like yourself who has I don't know how old you are, but I could guess at least a decade of training with these weapons or time spent around
Hell
these
no.
weapons?
I don't have a decade of training. I got my first weapon long ago, but not a decade ago. My grandpa gave me his 9-shot revolver, and then I bought a few more on my own.
I'm not going to call you old. I just, you put together.
More mature than you, yeah.
Yeah, you put together. You threw child out there, so I said, I could give you 20. I could see 28. I could, give you a number.
You think I'm 28? I'll take the compliment.
No, I was just giving
I'm
you.
34.
Speaking of,
I'm 34. I'll take the compliment.
Oh, well, then you said there was no way you could have had 10 years. So I was assuming you were saying you were younger.
No, you got to understand, when I was younger, I didn't really do weapon stuff. It wasn't until my grandfather was old and almost, demented, he gave me his 22. That's the first weapon I used, and I don't even think you want to ban that kind of weapon. It's a 22. That revolver is 50 years old.
What I'm saying is, let's return to some of the things that I was saying. You can talk about ARs being used for killing feral pigs, which is absolutely absurd. You can talk about.
Google it. No.
No. I know it's something that happens. I know it's something that happens. I know that there are feral pigs out there that people use their weapons to kill. But I think if we did the trade-off of feral pigs to those young 19 children who are slaughtered in their own classroom, I think you would have to take a minute to say, which do I care more about? And also,
think of the children past the Patriot Act.
If you can't kill pigs from your patio with your firearm without having to have, 100 rounds in it, then maybe you need a little bit more practice.
But like I was saying, how dangerous hogs can be? They're carnivorous, dude. They'll rip you apart. I don't want to take a 22 revolver to go and kill hogs.
You said that you could do it just as easily as you could with an AR.
I'm saying that I can fire as many shots, but a human being is not the same as a 500-pound pig.
That's not what was said. You said with the right amount of training, I could do. No.
Yes, I can do as much damage to a human. Humans are not well armored.
When this is cut on YouTube, this is when we're going to roll it. This will be the period when
I'm sure that you'll selectively edit it.
Wait, Jack. To be fair, when we were talking about this,
a 150, 200-pound human being. Look at how thin the skin is. You think that a hog is the same? Or a bear?
But you said you could do the same amount of damage with an AR.
In the context of school shootings.
To a human, absolutely.
Yeah. No, Jack, to be fair,
accurate at close to intermediate range with my revolver.
Again,
but I wouldn't. But if I shoot a pig, it doesn't matter if I hit the pig in the forehead. It's going to bounce off its skull. You don't know anything about guns. No, I wanted to. But you've talked for like 5 minutes. Let me make one quick point. You're talking about bodies being mutilated by the AR-15, okay, in the Uvalde shooting. The AR-15 generally doesn't mutilate. It is a wounding gun. What you're indicating is actually far worse and far more grotesque than you even understand. And I would actually agree with you. The police refused to respond. There were no good guys with a gun. There were a bunch of coward pigs out there that refused to respond for an entire hour, showing we cannot rely upon police and must defend ourselves, while an idiot, a goddamn psychopath, riddled those small children with bullets. He shot them over and over when they were already dead. That's why they were mincemeat. It wasn't because he shoots them one time, they die, they're already dead, that's already a tragedy, and magically their body explodes. This is not a Doom game. This is not Fallout. This isn't, hey, I've got this special perk. If I shoot this person in the head with the special critical, their head blows up. That's not what the AR-15 does. If he turned them into Swiss cheese, he did it when they were already dead because he's a goddamn madman and a pervert. That's the truth.
So we can agree on something. Good guy with a gun doesn't work because cops are cowards.
They're not good guys with a gun. They're pigs. They didn't do their job. They should all be fired. No, a good guy with a gun did go into the building and finally kill the dude. It was an off-duty ICE officer, not the cops. The cops sat there masturbating with their thumbs up their ass and did goddamn nothing. If you think that parents don't want to arm up and preferably homeschool their kids at this point, you're nuts.
But a good guy with a gun, 99% of the time, has not been the solution to these problems.
False. There are more shootings in self-defense than in offense in the United States.
But
in some cases, they don't even have to shoot. They just say, "Hey, I'm armed," and they leave them alone.
Good guys with guns are not preventing mass shootings.
Sure, they're not.
No,
sure
they
are. Look at the Woodby Garland shooting back during the Draw Muhammad Day event. That was back in like 2014. Some off-duty mall cop geared the dude out. He was going in there to kill a bunch of people.
And how many mass shootings have we had since then? And how many mass shootings have we had since then?
How many self-defense instances?
250 in this year alone.
Yeah, and tens of thousands of instances where a person, in many cases, didn't even need to fire a shot because the assailant ran off the second they saw the person was armed. The average person, you aim a gun at them, they're going to run in the other direction because they don't even have a gun in many cases because they are criminals. And that's wonderful. People should be armed at all times. Good guy with a gun is me, not some mall cop.
Okay, well, you're not everywhere.
No, but I can be where I am. I can defend my family. I can defend my community. If I'm out at the store, if I was out at the store and somebody starts shooting, yes, damn right, I'm going to return fire. They might kill me otherwise.
Would be a ban on the weapons that you're trying to defend against.
What are you talking about? The average shooting involves a handgun. I've got 2 of them. My Glock 17 is better than the average handgun used by some retard gangbanger anyway.
How many guns do you have?
I have 4 of them. I have an HR Sportsman 22, a Ruger 22, that's an old single-shot revolver, a Glock 42, which is concealed carry, it's in .380, and then a Glock 17. And when I get back to the United States, I'm going to buy 2 or 3 more fucking weapons. I think it's wonderful. I've also got body armor. I've got a bunch of MREs. I've got all sorts of great shit. And I am allowed to do that. I'm a member of the militia. Absolutely.
Now, returning to the point that I was trying to make earlier, I just don't think guns that can do that are guns that need to be owned by people in this country.
Then we need to ban all guns, according to you, because all of them can do that. Once a person's dead, if you keep shooting them over and over, they will turn into hamburger.
Similar legislation to that of which we've seen in other countries, which has been extremely proven ineffective, is what we should implement.
They don't have a Second Amendment. It's not applicable. Some of those nations are islands. I love it when people talk about the Australian gun buyback and don't realize it's kind of hard to run guns into a country if you have to have a naval capability to do so. Little bit more different than walking across Biden's porous southern border where he invites people, cartel members in, and then gives them automatic weapons like Fast and Furious. Your own government doesn't even take this concept seriously. We were running automatic weapons, literal machine guns, down to Sinaloa not that long ago, and it killed a border agent. And that same government told you that you don't need more than 10 shots in your locker. We're sending billions of dollars in weapons to Ukraine right now. Those civilians, perfectly fine. They should own every machine gun, missiles, tanks. Those are good. Those are good people. Exactly. Those people, they're perfectly allowed to own all of these weapons. But American citizens, oh my God, we can't trust them with this fucking AR-15.
I have a quick question
I think
for
that's
Jack.
Crazy.
Jack, would you be able to give any steel manning at all to the idea of prevention of a government becoming so oppressive against its people if there's no way that people would be able to defend themselves from governmental tyranny? Because I know we covered self-defense, but as far as the potential, and I'm not saying we're in this state now, but as far as the potential for a government to become tyrannical, do you see a check on that tyranny being the ability to defend oneself with weapons that are a little bit above what you would consider to be the right weapons for people to have?
Imagine Mike Pence as president.
I can't imagine Mike Pence as president. I don't think Mike Pence can really imagine Mike Pence as president. I don't know who would be electing Mike Pence. The people who wanted to hang him. Do I think that that's the solution? I think we saw, as I referenced earlier, a bit of a tyrannical government in 2020. I think we saw a bit of a police state. And I know you're going to want to hop in and say, what, with the lockdowns? No, I'd say police, shooting rubber bullets and tear gassing peaceful protesters in Washington, D.C. I think that was a
You
bit
mean
of
at
a
the Kavanaugh commencement, or?
No, I said in 2020. Kavanaugh was 2018. 2020.
Yeah.
During the protest of the murder of George Floyd. The peaceful protest that we saw people tear gas, we saw people shot with rubber bullets, we saw, I think a very clear example is that clip that went viral of the older gentleman being shoved over and having his head split in the back by a police officer. Like, I think we can both agree that, police officers have done a lot more bad than good. And I think a clear example of that is those protests. And I think another clear example of that is the cowards that were in Uvalde.
Quite poignant. Yeah. So you want them to go door to door to make sure that everyone's guns are locked up properly and that they don't have the wrong magazine size. Then they're good cops.
To answer your question, do I think that an armed militia is what would prevent, government tyranny in the United States? Absolutely not. No.
So then you don't understand anything about the history of the AK-47. Now look what the Vietnamese or the Koreans did, or the Taliban. Or the Libyans.
I don't think if you really wanted to talk about going to war with our government, a government that spends almost $1 trillion a year on its military, I don't think did you say irrelevant?
How do you maintain supply lines when millions of people are sabotaging them? A tank can't stand on the street corner and enforce a no gathering edict. You need men.
Sure, but do you think you could go to war with the U.S. military with your ragtag group of buddies, with your katanas?
Yes. I think that a few million militia would absolutely steamroll the U.S. military, especially once half the military defects. Yeah. It'd be a little bit different from projecting force over to Vietnam or Afghanistan to kill a bunch of kids. Yeah.
I also don't think that any Americans are coming together in any solidarity on any issue.
Oh, I'm not saying that anyone intends to rise up against the government.
I don't think the people with the majority of the guns in this country are going to come together to defend anything of use.
But what difference does that make?
They tried to overturn our election in 2020.
Yeah, no. Well, what does that have to do with the definition of militia or whether the AR-15 is a baby-killing Swiss cheesemaker? Doesn't have anything to do with it.
The question is no.
So there's nothing to do with it. So why even bring it up? The militia is not requisite upon people's
answering a question.
The militia's existence as a civilian population which is armed is not requisite on them constantly mustering. In fact, if you want to have a good military, it makes sense to have a well-armed populace that's capable of using weapons because they need less training. It's a lot cheaper. This is one of the reasons we did kicked ass.
Why don't other countries do it then?
I don't care about what other countries do.
Why is this strictly an American issue?
Because we've got a Second Amendment and the concept of the militia is a departure from the old world. When the United States was founded, we essentially said, fuck the old European old world system because it clearly doesn't work. They have state religions.
Kids go to school without worrying about being shot.
Okay. Tell that to the third worlders. They have state religions. They're constantly censoring the press. People have to ask permission to defend themselves.
Tell that to Norway.
Japan is an island. Japan is an island. Little bit easier to stymie gun sales now, isn't it, when they have to come in by boat or plane, as opposed to coming across the porous southern Mexican border in the United States. Guns mainly going in the other direction. It's the CIA's cocaine that mainly comes north. We sell them machine guns in return and then tell American citizens they're not allowed to have their Glock anymore. 9mm is a scary round. It'll turn people into meat burgers, make them into sausages.
So
it's horseshit.
The large amount of guns that are owned in America make this country better.
Absolutely. I just wish there were more of them. I think that we should mandate. I think it should be mandatory that every household has a gun.
More guns than people. You think
that's not enough.
That every house has a gun?
Every household should have a gun. We should have nationwide stand your ground,
well,
nationwide castle doctrine,
right there. Am I right?
And the NFA. No. Actually, multiple founders pointed out it wasn't just a right, but a responsibility of members of the militia to be well regulated.
Which of those?
I believe that was Hamilton, if I remember correctly.
I only
I'd have to quote mine. I've got quotes here about what the militia means. I didn't want to have 20 quotes.
If you have any quotes from John Adams, then that could go a little bit of ways, and maybe.
Well, I mean, John Adams was the Alien and Sedition Act bullshitter, so I don't give a shit about what he said. George Washington said that the people should maintain proper arms in order to resist tyranny, including their own government. So I'll just take
the tyranny that they wanted to resist was the people to the west whose land that they took. I think that's what.
No, it was their own British government, actually. Their regulars.
No.
Yeah, that was what they were fighting.
I think it was the natives who were tyranny, the natives who we had to defend against.
Total revisionism here. Now that is one hell of a revisionist stretch. They made it quite clear that it was the regulars from their own government in Britain that they had a problem with. That's why we departed from the Euro system. Yeah, they were afraid of being attacked by Native Americans, up to and including the fact that when they tried to disarm the colonists, that's one of the reasons why they didn't want to be disarmed, because they faced invasion from hostile so-called native forces on a regular basis. The British came along and said,
who had their land taken from them.
Fuck that. That's a totally separate argument. Well, they were taking each other's land for thousands of years, but we'll get past that for just now because it's a bait argument.
But it wasn't ours.
Which tribe? Native American, which tribe? It's just like saying, oh, these Italians invaded the French, but they're both white, so it's basically the same. Stop confusing ethnicity with race for a moment, but that's a bait argument, and I'm not taking the line. We're talking about guns. That's the point of the debate. The British marched in. We're going to take your military weapons away. You're storing this. You're storing these.
Hold on, one at a time, people. You're storing, Styx and then Jack.
You've got all these rifles and muskets and bayonets and cannons and powder and stuff in this armory, and we're uncomfortable with you doing that. And the colonists said fuck off to their own government at the time, wielding military weapons, and then proceeded to kick the shit out of them. Now, part of that's because it's hard to project force across the ocean. I'm not gung-ho for the star-spangled, God-given bullshit sort of argument. But they did. They won. And part of what they instituted was that the government could not impugn upon your right to own weapons. It doesn't matter what weapons they are. No, it doesn't matter if it's the uber-scary AR-15 boogeyman that people like you have a paranoid problem with because you've never seen one fire, you know nothing about it, you think that it's a weapon of war that turns people into meatball casserole, and you don't know anything shit for guns. You say yourself you don't own a gun. Have you ever fired one?
Yes.
Okay, what kind of gun? A BB gun?
No, an AR-15.
Wonderful. Then you should know better.
I should know that when I fired that weapon, which I hate to admit, but just one time, because again, do you know what we're doing here? We're having a debate and trying to understand each person's perspective. So
okay,
I wanted to understand the perspective. Pardon?
You fired the gun, and why did you have a problem with it?
I thought, why the hell would anyone need this much power behind a firearm?
Did you fire any other weapon? Did you fire like a revolver? Something for comparison, I mean.
Yeah, of course. I wouldn't. So it was a handgun. I wouldn't be able to tell you any classification of it because that's not really. I can't go back to a year ago and bring that back into my memory. If you want me to send you an email afterwards, I could ask
Joe Biden.
What?
Fire a 50 cal. Fire a 50 cal now for comparison, and then you'll quickly back off the AR-15 as a baby killer argument then.
But
or 308.
But it is because, again, you seem to want to talk about the AR-15 in this abstract in which it hasn't already killed children and mass murdered groups of people, which it has. And that's why we're having this discussion.
Vehicles. Look at
I was invited to have this discussion because there was a mass shooting that killed 21 people and 19 children, and the weapon of choice was an AR-15, which was purchased by an 18-year-old the day before.
That's what if it had been a 308? Then you would really have trouble identifying the bodies.
But again, you love to say, "What if it was?" But it wasn't. It wasn't.
No, but Jack, the problem, though, is that if it wasn't going to be an AR-15, it would have been something else. That's what we agreed on before, that it doesn't matter whether it was.
He did it with fertilizer.
But it was. And that's the thing. It was an AR-15. And they have been AR-15s consistently.
And AK-47s. Can I have one of those?
They have been AR-15s. And that's why we're having the discussion about the AR-15. Not because I'm saying I think the AR-15 will do this, and I think it has the potential to, and I want to stop it before it does. This is not me saying, I think it'll do this, and you saying, I know more about guns. It won't.
I do.
This is us saying, the AR-15 has done this. Let me show you the long list of mass shootings. Let me show you the
You know how many people were
list of
killed by the
who have been
Winchester
victims of
repeating
destruction.
rifle? All those Native
Again,
Americans you claim to love
We
so
are
much?
having a conversation about something that has actually happened. This is not abstract. This is not a
We need to ban
hypothetical. This is
fertilizer
not a
then,
what
because
if.
Timmy McVeigh wasn't that long ago. I can
So that's a
remember
great pivot right there, and I love it. And it's all fine and good, and I'm happy that you keep your lawn, nice and strong and growing with fertilizer. But this is not in the abstract.
Well,
This is
Jack,
real.
hold on. Let's go back in time a little bit. We were having a discussion half an hour ago where you yourself confirmed that if the AR-15 was banned, people were going to use other guns, and that's going to keep
I didn't say
happening.
that.
Well, no,
Well, it's
you
true
were
anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd be right.
No. I
But
asked you. Wait, hold
just-
on. I asked
ahead.
you, Jack. I asked you if the AR-15 was going to be banned. What would happen then? Would other guns be employed in those same situations? And you agreed. Other guns would be employed, and then you were
I
talking.
said if
yes.
they were, because you said then I just want to
Sure.
clarify, because I'm totally okay with this whole line of where we're going. I did say that if the AR-15 was banned, you said, what if other weapons were then used in their place? And I said, well, if other weapons were used in their place,
Okay,
the
fine,
discussion
if.
around was, I just want to make sure that
But you disagree on the if. So by saying if, you're saying that they're not going to be used. You're saying that as long as the AR-15 is out, no other gun is going to be used in the same situation. That's what I don't get here, because it seems very obvious that other guns would be used if the AR-15
But what
was not around.
I'm saying is I can understand a world in which those weapons would then be used. And what I'm also saying to that is if those weapons will also be used, and they'll be used in a similar fashion. And I remember saying this because I said I don't want the conversation to then be turned around and say, well, what is a weapon? Anything can be a weapon. And that's when we got into hogs and pigs and how you could do the same amount of damage with a revolver. And so I said, great, if you can do the same amount of damage with a revolver, you can do that to those feral hogs. What I was saying is
showing that you know nothing about guns. There's a difference.
you said you could do the same amount of damage. That was
to
not
a
my
human.
quote, that was yours.
Yes.
Again, you
To
want
a
to talk in the
human?
abstract.
Yes.
I'm talking about what is
That's
said.
not abstract. That's just raw pragmatism. A bear
said
is
you
not
could
the
do the
same
same
thing as a
amount of damage.
raccoon.
But why are you having
Yes.
if? That's what I don't get. Jack, why do you say if? It's very obvious that other weapons will be used in place of an AR-15. Can we at least agree on that? I don't understand where the if is coming from here.
I would like to point something out.
The if
briefly
is coming
after
from
he's
that
done.
AR-15s are the weapon of choice in all of these mass shootings. And when I say all, of course, I do not mean every individual instance.
Well, that's funny
about if
because
we
I
want
can
to go-
remember Columbine being a big thing, and that was a high point in a Tech 9. There was no AR-15 used there.
I'll say again, the reason why we're having this discussion is AR-15s have been used consistently and constantly in mass shootings that have been used to wipe out people in as an efficient rate as possible by 18-year-olds.
No, they've been used because they're relatively inexpensive and achievable, not because they're the best weapon. If they wanted the best weapon, they would not be using an AR-15.
This is great. This is great. They're available and they're cheap.
Yeah,
Let's talk about this. These 18-year-olds, like I said earlier, they're not criminal masterminds. If you make it more difficult for them to get a gun, it will be more difficult for them to get a gun. They waited till they were 18. The shooter.
Yeah, okay, so now they'll wait till they're
waited
21 to
let
go
me
shoot
finish
the
my
school
point.
up.
The shooter at Uvalde waited till he was 18. Till it was legal.
Okay.
And then got the cheapest gun possible, is what you're saying.
No, it's
Because
not the
it's
cheapest.
cheap.
I'm saying it's relatively available. It's a
So it's
relatively
available.
easy
And so
modular
he got it.
platform.
So if guns were less available and it was more difficult to get, they would then be more difficult to get. And in countries where these weapons are more difficult to get, you see fewer of these mass shootings.
You see plenty of violent crimes and murders in these countries. It's just that people have to use something other than firearms. I love how you always I love how the anti-gunners, by the way, always fixate on just Western Europe and Oceania as comparisons. They never compare it to the vast bulk of the entire rest of the developing or undeveloped world, where guns are variably available or unavailable. They never look
What
at the
are we?
statistics there.
Are we a developed country?
Why
Who
does
would
that
you like
matter?
me to what do you want our
Why
comp
does
to
it-
be? Yes,
why
it
does the
does.
topic
Yes,
matter?
it absolutely does.
Why
What
would
do
the
you want
why
our comp
would
to
why
be?
would the development index matter in regards to gun availability? If guns are the cause of the violence, then we should look at third world nations where guns are only available to militiamen, to the actual militaries, or to the government, and we should say, God, nobody else has guns. They should be really peaceful. Or do you want to drag a racial premise into it, perhaps? Because it's not about money. We don't see a huge discrepancy between poor and rich people in the Western world and their relative gun violence. So it's not wealth. Is it the availability of weapons? Because they're not generally available to the general population in most of the world. And yet you have half the countries in the world have much more gun crime. You have
It is
mass
the
murders and
availability of
genocides.
weapons. It's the availability of weapons.
So
how
then
easy
all of
they
those-
are,
so
and
then
how
all of
little
those
training
purges-
that they require.
So
and
then
how
all of
little
those-
background checks that they require.
So then all of those purges in the third world, they don't mean anything because they're brown people, right? Just like with Crookshank. Yes, I think that the
I
lily
don't
white
know how
gated
that's a- I
community
don't know how
liberals
that's
like
a point that
yourself,
you're trying to make.
there's a bigoted impetus at some point.
Well, Jack,
I
how
don't
familiar
know how
are you?
that's a
How
conclusion
familiar
you're
are
trying
you
to
with Latin America, with places in the third world that have
Venezuela.
strict gun policies?
But again, I don't know why that's the comp. I don't know why we're trying to make that the comp.
The what?
The comparison.
Yeah, you don't want to compare it to those countries, only the ones with lower gun crime. I wonder why. Well, it's not the availability of guns. You're claiming that, but yet guns are virtually unavailable. Look at Mexico. There's one gun store licensed in the
Which
whole
country
of
is the
Mexico.
United States more comparable to?
Well, any of them for the matter of gun availability. They're either available or they're not. Switzerland, guns are available. Everyone has guns. Mexico, there's one gun store in the whole country. Why don't we make that comparison? You see, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics.
I just think
You want to
that
fix it only for developed countries.
I just think
There's a
jumping
reason.
to, oh, well, Venezuela is just such a ridiculous point to make at the end of this thing, trying to bring your argument together. I just
Why?
don't think that's strong because that's such a cop-out.
Why?
That's not the discussion that we've been
Qualify your
having.
premise. Why is it a cop-out? Why should it not be
Because that's
compared to
not
that
the
country as
discussion that we've
opposed
been having. We've been having a discussion about these, about our country.
Yeah.
and
You're trying to
countries
compare it to
similar
Finland. I'm
compared
trying to compare it to a different country. What's the difference? What are the
comparisons
Finns more
that I've
like?
made
They're
of-
more like the
The
United States because
comparisons
they're
that I've made
European
are
and
of
white.
countries where weapons were available, not at a level in the United States, because no, I don't.
Okay, they're
think any-
virtually unavailable in most of the undeveloped world. So unless you're making an economic argument and saying poverty is causing crime, which clearly is not the case, at least for the most part in the US outside of a few blighted inner city areas, then the comparison is just as apt. Why can you compare it to Norway or to England and I can't compare it to Venezuela or Colombia? It's because it undermines your argument. And that's really the sum and substance.
countries that have implemented stricter gun regulations.
So like Mexico, there's one gun store in the whole country, dude. Venezuela, you do not have a gun unless you're part of the Chavezista sort of movement. You're a commie, you're a party member, you're one of their partisans. What about all of these other countries, Zimbabwe or something? No, you can't have a gun unless you get direct permission from the government or you're currently in the military. They've got extreme gun control. I love it when people say, well, the libertarian homeland should be Somalia. Try getting a gun in Somalia unless you're a terrorist. So the only people that have guns, criminals and the government. Well, it should be really great. There shouldn't be any crime there. Why is there genocide there? I don't understand it. Guns generally aren't available to 99% of the people. Good luck finding one.
And when have I said in the entirety of this discussion that guns should not be generally available to everyone?
Okay, well, then you're arguing against the European-style system. Have you looked at the laws in those countries?
But when have I said that guns period, just guns, should not be widely available?
Why does that matter? First, we've got your fixation
Because
on certain
we're
types
having
of
a
guns.
different
You yourself
they're
attempted to compare the United States for gun crime with Norway and other countries in Western Europe. Extreme development, largely homogenous societies, I would posit, by the way. But you don't want me to make the comparison with other societies with similar gun laws. Why is that? Unless you think the socioeconomic premise explains why there's a discrepancy in gun crime. Why would Mexico, with its particularly high gun control system, be demonstrably different? I would think it would be closer to the US. It's literally bordering it. It's in the Americas. It's got that more non-homogenous society. I would think that would be a more welcome fit than Norway. Why? I don't understand. Unless you think, well, the brown people. You don't want the comparison because they've got high gun crime.
Again,
that's the truth. That's the answer.
I was making a direct comparison to similar countries that have implemented gun legislation. That is
Mexico. Mexico is more similar to the U.S. than Norway. More similar language, same continent, etc. Much more crossover between cultures.
More similar language.
Absolutely, Spanish, Norwegian, and Spanish. Which one's closer?
Is that a factor in the level of? So also, I'd like to say that my glasses don't fit me that well because
nobody cares.
Them.
Are you saying
you're
saying that poverty, I guess, causes gun crime? You're saying that gun availability does, but then you're immediately pivoting when it's pointed out that much of the world has virtually no gun availability, and most of that same world, third world and developing nations, and some that are developed, have more gun crime. And certainly much more murder and violent crime in general. You can't make the insinuation that Mexico is safer than most parts of the U.S. I guess if you go to Chicago or something.
And there it is. And I knew you were going to bring it up, and that's why I said it earlier, that you'd bring up Chicago, which is right by a place where it's very easy to get guns.
Yeah, in Indianapolis, it's easier to get guns. Why doesn't Indiana have such a high crime rate? I've already pointed that out. Why is it Chicago has so much crime, but the neighboring state where all the guns come from has relatively reasonable amounts of violent crime? Well, could it be it's a city? But it has nothing to do with gun availability. Again, there are plenty of countries.
Guns are available, though. They're very available. Of course
they are. They're technically available in Mexico, too, if you want to go through the 10-year waiting list to go to the one gun store in the country that's licensed.
But again,
plenty of gun crime. The U.S. supplies them half their guns.
But again, the conversation that we were having, that I was brought on to have, came about because of an AR-15. And so I wanted to discuss...
No, it came about because of a psychopath. The AR-15 is the tool the psychopath used.
And just to be clear, we were not talking about only discussing the AR-15. That was something that recently happened.
No, of course. I don't mean to insinuate that you said, "Hey, Jack, I want you to come on and talk about the AR-15."
But going back to the if argument, I want to make sure once again I keep bringing this up because I think it's very important. Yeah. When you were saying,
Lev, I've got to interrupt. At some point, I got to go off here.
All right, then we're going to go to super chats. But before we go to super chats, I want to make sure about the if thing. So you were saying that if the AR-15 was not going to be around, if it's going to be banned, then maybe other people would be using other guns. I want to make sure that we kind of square that away, where I don't think it is going to be an if. I think it's going to be a absolutely. If there's not going to be an AR-15, other guns will be used in school shootings, correct? That's a guarantee, right?
It's not a guarantee.
So the people will decide, well, you know what? I'm not going to go into the school and shoot because there's no AR-15s. I'm just going to give up.
Again, the bill as it stands, but the bill is as the bill stands. The bill that we are, originally talking about. The bill that I think we both do. Well, we both do. You made a whole video about the bill.
But the question is if the AR-15 is not available. So we banned them, or even all sporting rifles.
This is me in 5 seconds getting to my answer.
Yeah.
What liberals have called for, like myself, in the bill is a ban on assault weapons, not the AR-15 specifically. Okay? The AR-15 fits the description of the type of weapon that we would like to see banned. You are saying that it's a guarantee. Weapons that resemble that type of weapon and what it's able to do, we agree, and the vast majority of Americans agree, should either be banned or, and I'm not saying the vast majority of Americans agree with a direct ban, but I know, because I have to, read polling for a living, that they agree that there should be an age limit. 21, some cases 25. And I think that is very reasonable. I don't think that's an infringement on your right, considering that it's not. Sorry,
it's an infringement upon members of the militia who are of the age of majority.
But your if is still an if. My knowledge, what I can directly see is there are 18-year-olds using AR-15s to commit mass murders in schools.
And Tech 9s and Uzis and a million other weapons as well.
Sometimes
handguns. 17-year-olds. They weren't. They were 18-year-olds purchasing them legally. So what I can tell you is they wouldn't have been able to purchase them legally if there was an age requirement.
So you think that a violent psychopath that wants to turn 19 kids into Swiss cheese gives a shit about the law?
They are not criminal masterminds.
Then what are they? They're psychopaths. Do psychopaths care about the law either?
But again, they're 18. They're not 17. If you make it more difficult to obtain these weapons, it's more difficult to obtain these weapons. It just is. They waited until they were 18.
Okay.
All right, we're going to be going.
Let's go to super chats because I do have to get off.
We're gonna be going to super chats. So here we go. Eric Milan, and by the way, everybody, if you're enjoying this, check out the previous episodes that Styx was on, and there is going to be a great episode coming up this Thursday, and that is going to be about American hegemony as far as having bases in other countries and what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. That's going to be a debate between Jeremy Kaufman, who I'm sure Counterpoints, who, if you're not familiar with him, check him out. He's a really interesting dude. Former military, by the way. Anyway, let's get into the super chats and patreon.com/breaktherules. Become a patron today, and you are going to get a very beautiful Styx dragon if you become a $50 patron. So for $20, you are going to get these very beautiful, look at these things. These are beautiful wooden magnets that you are going to get. And if you become a $50 patron, you are going to get a very exquisite dragon here. I'm putting the picture here. Look at this guy. So that's going to be for $50 tier. Styx has one of these as well. Beautiful Styx dragon. So that's patreon.com/breaktherules. Become a patron today. Anyway, here are the super chats. Eric Milan, $20. Ban all guns used on January 6th. Any comment? Okay. Fictagus Dave Savage, £2. Sorry. AR gets banned. Dems go to next gun of the moment. Well, I guess that was the thing we were talking before about tan guns and all that, as far as like the possibility of that. So anyway, let's go to the next super chat, and I really appreciate all the super chats here. All right, Reality Paranormal, $4.99. No man is going to tell me what I need to defend myself. Mick Chlavok, what is this? Czech? 50 Czech dollars. Consequences of disarming the population versus consequences of having two same-sex people having a marriage certificate. Tough one. Hopium Gardener, $2 Australian dollars? Yes, Jack, guns can be taken. Look at NZ Australia. Yeah, New Zealand, Australia. Green Nanja, $4.99. Tell me how you're going to take away guns from the cartels. Will open-door policies encourage people to smuggle more in? I mean, I kind of want to stop with that one in case anyone has a comment on that.
No, you can't, so.
All right, Boojalicious3, $5. Do you think there would be COVID camps in Australia if they still had guns?
Yes. I don't think that people would take up arms over such a thing, even if it's potentially justified, depending on the Constitution.
Julian P., $5. Want to end flesh-tearing rounds, ban the 12 GA. Shotgun, require less skill level at close range would be their next move. Darun Alban, $5. Look up Puckle Gun, 1700s machine gun. Well, there were machine guns after that as well. There were pretty...
I would like to clarify the Puckle Gun technically was not an automatic or even technically semi-automatic weapon. That is not entirely accurate.
NYBSFP, $9.99. The unfortunate truth is our freedoms and the global progress that has resulted from it comes at a cost. Second Amendment is a major variable that does have some friction, but the true balance of it is intertwined. Scotty S., $1.99. Jack's only course is to appeal to emotions and clown emoji. Mikalo, and by the way, Jack, I do really appreciate you coming in. I just want to say this is great of you to be able to do this. Mikhail Vok, 50 Czech dollars. Czech Republic, my country, is as of late being called the most benevolent gun laws country in the West after the U.S. Our gun crime is practically none. Then we have Hopium Gardener, $5. Australian. Does Jack actually believe the current day of woke AF trans inclusive military would be wiped out by a militia? Next, Leroy Baggins, $4.99. First off, my AR-15 didn't kill people, the shooters did. Styx, please explain the AR is just a blacked out semi-auto hunting rifle.
Yeah, basically, it looks tactical and it's aesthetically based on military weaponry. Otherwise, it's just the same as any other semi-auto rifle.
The English
But
loyalist...
I think Jack, you didn't give Jack a chance to respond to the last one. What was it?
Okay, so the last one was, does Jack actually believe the current day woke as fuck trans-inclusive military wouldn't be wiped out by a militia?
I really just don't even know what to say to the transphobia of that comment, but I just...
But it's funny anyway.
Yeah, next over here, the English loyalist, $4.99. Jack is the type of guy to have tribes disarm and let the U.S. government come in, who will oppress and slaughter us. Cuck Jack, don't us for your argument. Nisbif, I can pronounce this, $4.99. Banning anything will lead to necessity inventing a new version. Banning sales will increase 3D printing. Ban objects will evolve new objects. JT Brown, $10. Leftists only care about the narrative. You'll never convince them using logic. Just nonstop appeals to emotion. Fictages David Savage, £2. Where did the poor 18-year-old shooter get the money? Leroy Baggins. Actually, I'm curious about that. Does anybody have any comment on that?
Probably raided mommy's purse or something like that.
Leroy Baggins, $4.99. Jack cares about the bill because he has the Democrat privilege of actually using political power without being called a terrorist. Company boy. We have Mr. Willie 2204.
Is this person insinuating that January 6th was political power? Like, I'm not even gonna find.
Mr. Willie 2204, $1.99. No comment, thank you. Seth comes ripping, $20. Clank. Apache Senpai, $5. Can Jack please define what an assault rifle is?
Can someone explain clank to me?
That's because I used to always have my cup and I would keep the spoon in it, and during videos I would clank it against the sides, and it just became a meme.
Okay.
And finally,
I just saw so many clanks.
Yes, and finally, William Nichols, $5. Pistols are behind most of mass murders. Making guns illegal means only criminals will have them. And please define assault weapon. Well, another in a row here. Comment. And finally, Mr. Willie 2204, $4.99. So I have one question before we go. I wanted to ask to Jack, and again, Jack, really appreciate you being here, hanging around with us, speaking with us about this. I think it shows, that despite differences, that you're willing to have these kind of conversations. That is A+ in my book. But my final question to you, Jack, is since you are around people who are involved with the Democratic Party, who have a certain political affiliation, you're a young dude right now. Let's say you keep maturing, you learn new things along the way, you look at different viewpoints, and all of a sudden you figure out, hey, like maybe Styx has a point, maybe there's some danger here of creeping tyranny if this stuff is taken away, whatever. My concern is, since you're surrounded by people who would have a particular opinion as far as the political connections that you have, how much leeway would you even be able to give yourself as you keep going in life to even allow yourself to think differently here? Because wouldn't it make the people around you, be very frustrated that, hey, this person all of a sudden is thinking differently from us? Is that ever a worry to you, that because the political people that you're around with, you're only going to be able to have certain opinions, lest you become a pariah within your own circle?
Well, I'll say this. I was watching, and I don't know how much time we have, and I don't want to keep it too long, so I'm going to run this too long. I was watching the finals last night, the Celtics and the Warriors, and the Celtics are my team, and they lost, and I went to bed at like 2:30 in the morning because I was just disappointed. And I went to bed at 2:30 in the morning to wake up at 7:30 after not getting a lot of sleep the night before to come on this show and to have a discussion. So I got not a lot of sleep, woke up early when I didn't really want to have a discussion about an issue and to hear from a different perspective. So I think that shows enough in me to be able to hear out other people, to hear out other perspectives, and to actually change my mind on issues. I am, I go to an Ivy League school, so I'm assuming everyone believes that all the people that I spend all of my time around are just like liberal to the extreme. But that is not necessarily true. And I do try to hear out other people's opinions. That's why I was happy to come on this show. Do I think that if I heard a point, I would actually change? Yes, I do. Did I hear any today? I don't really think I did.
But wouldn't it piss off the people who were around you if all of a sudden you started adopting a different point? I don't want to harp on this too much, but that's always been a very big thing for me as far as
it's interesting. It's interesting how you assume that people will assume that Ivy Leaguers are all liberal.
Well, isn't that the assumption? I had someone write a story
that's a stereotypical remark, arguably about the uncouth non-Ivy Leaguers projecting upon them having a stereotype about Ivy Leaguers.
No. Someone wrote an article about me 5 days ago.
I don't care about the article.
No. And the opening line was, "Oh, and he goes to an Ivy League school, of course." So this is a stereotype that people.
That's a sample size of 1, and you say that you analyze polls for a living.
Plowing ahead.
I actually do, by the way.
Well, we're going to end this right now. I just want to say that in the situation that I'm in the National Arts Club and in the New York high society, whatever you want to call it, people are very scared of speaking out against what's considered to be the right political opinion. That's the only reason why I mention it, that it may be tough if you change your mind to be able to face the people around you, because all of a sudden they'll be like, why is Jack saying all these things that we're against, Or the people who would be on your side would be scared to speak out. It has nothing to do with this debate. I just want to throw that out there, that hopefully you will be able to reach out to people who would not react that way if you do end up changing your mind, and then you would keep an open mind going forward.
Hey, Lev, can I do a quick closing here? And then I have to go off.
Sure, go for it. Yes.
Jack, it was nice talking to you, and thank you very much for the opportunity. Actually, this was much more civilized than quite a few of the debates that I've been in. So that's one for you, my dude. I may not agree with you. I disagree completely. But good on you for actually coming on. I apologize for the time zone difference as well. If it happens again, I'll probably be back in the U.S. so we can have a more humane time.
Yes, hopefully meeting live as well somewhere. That would be great.
And Lev, thank you for having us aboard. But I've got to sign out literally like now.
All right, Styx, thank you so much for being here. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, add a like. The likes really help the algorithm. Once again, patreon.com/breaktherules. Become a patron today. And yeah,